Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 805, written by Vexedrine. I saw a man running in reverse. This was about 2 months ago. My wife and I were driving down a back road in Oklahoma, headed back to our house. To set the scene, it was about 5 to 6 p.m. The wife says afternoon, mid-afternoon, but I don't recall the exact time. Regardless, the sun was still fairly high in the sky, and the weather was comfortable. It was probably 80 degrees with a light breeze. There's a three-way at the specific spot, and it's essentially a four-way, but one side is a private drive and the opposite direction heads to the highway. We were headed in such a way that the road that leads to the highway was on the right-hand side, and there were 5-foot-tall weeds along the road blocking view of the street. Just as we approached the three-way and began slowing down, we both witnessed a man doing what I can only describe as a very well-performed high-knee reverse jog. But it wasn't just that. He had a feather piece on his neck that also poked straight out backwards toward where he was running, and he pumped his arms running backwards, and right when his foot touched the grass by the driveway, he went into a very well orchestrated stretch downward, and the feather dropped flat down his back, and he stood up and began walking forward like nothing happened. I stopped and proceeded through the stop sign, and I kid you not, the dude started sprinting after the car, and after I was 100+ feet away, he began waving his arms like he was trying to get my attention. Definitely ranks as one of my top bizarre experiences recently. Case notes for file 805. I saw a man running in reverse. Whoa, what's going on? I'm upside down. What's happening? Okay, let's switch this back. Alright, we're back. So as far as physics is concerned, the flow of time is always forward. There's no real way to go backwards. To localize an area that reverses time is completely mind-bending. I wonder if perhaps this was some sort of skit. There's, especially in cities, sometimes organized groups go around performing various skits that seem to defy reality. Like they all coordinate a pause and pretend like they're frozen in time or something. Although running backwards is much harder. It appears it wasn't some group doing this, so I don't know why a single person would. Maybe just practice? For me, it's cool either way. If it's some time anomaly or just humans being pretty awesome, awesome. Case file number 806, written by Goddess Iris. The Droplet of Water Out of Thin Air. I was leaning over my bed, moving my blanket out of the way so I could sit. Then, a drop of water hit my face. It startled me, and the first thing I did was wipe it and look up. There's nothing on the ceiling, no signs of water at all. Pretty dusty actually, but dry as a desert. I would assume condensation from the AC vent, but it's across the room and the AC isn't even on. Even if it was, it doesn't get cold enough to produce condensation. Even if it did produce some, wouldn't it drop straight down? The AC would have to be blowing really hard to make it fly across the room, but again, it wasn't on and still isn't. I looked at the vent anyway, but it too is dry. There's no water on my bed or on the floor, so nothing was dripping before this happened, and there hasn't been a drip since. Not exactly as reality-breaking as some of the glitches out there, but it was definitely weird. Case notes for file 806, a droplet of water out of thin air. So water is very strange. There's many stories I've read that involve it. One, someone materialized seemingly water from nowhere. They were standing in a river and then they asked water to flow and an increase of water came. Maybe it was a reservoir or something, that a spillway that opened up ahead, but the timing of it was miraculous. And then another one, there was an entire cup of water that appeared out of nowhere and poured onto someone's head. And they had a witness too. Now, this is just a droplet in this case, but it's still baffling because there's no discernible source. It's just not possible. As far as we understand, water doesn't just materialize from the atmosphere outside of, fog or something like that. Droplets from inside a home, obviously not from rain clouds. Where does it come from? There's even stories involving spirits or echoes that somehow are drenched in water, and they vanish and there's a puddle of water on the floor or wet carpet. I don't know what it is with water. Water's very heavy. It's a lot of mass. So that's a lot of masks to conjure from nowhere. Creepy file number 54, written by Mocha AP. The Chase in the Night. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa, and here I will tell you my story, a very true story, which I describe as really terrifying and which unfortunately still affects my life today. You will understand why. I decided to share it with you because it took place exactly 2 years ago, and because I think it can serve to awaken the prudence of some, especially in this period where the days are shortening. To put you in context, this happened on October 1st, 2020, in the midst of the pandemic. I was 17 at the time and I had just left Île-de-France, near Paris, for a provincial town to continue my studies. As a student, 4 hours by train from my parents, I obviously decided to take an apartment. But the prices were unaffordable for me, so I settled in a brand new student residence. It is in the heart of a rich, bourgeois residential pavilion, contrasting with my small student residence. Everything is fine. I normally go to school, but right from the beginning, the teachers tell us that unlike students in other disciplines, we will have lessons in person and not at a distance. So we will be the only ones to animate this part of the campus. In short, the first classes are going pretty well, even though I have trouble fitting in like the others, mainly because of the masks and this nasty virus. There is also a black shadow. On Thursdays and Fridays, I finish at 8 p.m., which makes me return to my little house around 8:45 p.m., time to wait for the tramway that didn't pass often during the pandemic, and make the 3 stops before walking 10 minutes to the residence. As you understood, I was alone on my way to school. But in the week of September 21st to 27, when I went to class in the morning, I met strangely a man 3 times dressed in black, wearing a hood and whose face I could not really distinguish. What bothered me at the time was the fact that it didn't fit in with the neighborhood's chic environment, but I'm not focusing on that anymore. Finally, the night of October 1st. As usual, I leave school, but unlike the other days, I take the tram about 1 hour later. I finally made a friend with whom I discussed the time of his bus, and as usual, I wait alone, and once on the tramway, I realize that just at the stop there is nobody except the driver and me, so I decided to sit in the 4-seat squares to make myself more comfortable. At the next stop, which is still in the campus area, as I turn my head before the doors automatically close, my eyes cross that of a man sitting alone in black. And in half a second, the man blocks the doors that were closing and enters. While the tramway is empty, he sits in front of me. Intimidated and understanding that the situation is suspicious, I look away. I prefer to look out the window. The more time passes, the more my instinct leads me to believe that this man may have bad intentions. In my head, I begin to develop a plan to ensure that the person does not follow me when I have to go down. Once the tram arrives at its destination, I decide to leave at the last moment, just before the tram closes. As I start walking, I hear a cry and I turn my head. I see the man who managed to get out and obviously pinched his fingers blocking the doors. He then begins to walk behind me. This time it is sure I am followed. As I accelerate the pace, I hear the man do the same. I can even hear his breath coming closer. Then I had the idea to pretend to be on the phone to scare him. That worked at first. Indeed, when the man turned around, my phone rang. I later learned it was my friend who just wanted to tell me he had the wrong bus. I was sure he heard my cell phone ringtone and therefore understood the deception. I turn around and see the man slip something in his hand. I see nothing because of the night. He then starts screaming and running after me. While I am out of breath, I rush into a crossing with a neighbor. I throw myself in their arms and shout loudly, "Great, you came to get me." At these words, my neighbor immediately understood the situation and returned with me to the residence. Before that, I turned one last time and nothing. The man had disappeared. Once I'm in my room crying, I think back to this man's walk. It looks like the person I met earlier this week. I decided the next day to make a statement. During the day, I was called to tell myself that the surveillance videos of the tram had revealed the identity of the person. He was a wanted man for assault and armed robbery. Apparently, he found pleasure in assaulting rich girls to humiliate them before stealing from them. That's why he prowled in my neighborhood. My blood ran ice cold, and I decided to go home to my parents. Apparently, the man was found 2 weeks later in another city for assaulting a young girl in a store. The moral of the story: pay attention to yourself, especially at night. And above all, nothing is better than to follow your instincts. Still today, we talked about it with my neighbor. He confessed to me last year that he often sees the scene and especially rethinks my face, decomposed by fear. He says he's deeply shocked. Even if this story ends well, it has developed in me a kind of distrust. I remain always on my guard, especially when it comes to meeting people with hoodies. Now, I keep pepper spray in my bag. Case notes for the creepy file number 54, The Chase in the Night. Yeah, very creepy to be stalked. Obviously, I've never been stalked myself, preyed upon. All I can say is that I wish you had the pepper spray beforehand. Would have served him right. As he pinched his fingers in the door, turn around, get him in the eyes, and run off. Pepper spray is nasty. You don't want to get that in your face. I like spicy food, but not in my eyeballs.